Welcome again to American Christian or Christian American. Today, we're going to be talking about the Moors. We talked about them before, but I found another video with some more information about the Moors, and so I'm going to play that. I think it's very important when we talk about real history, where things came from. We talk about the fact that racism in this country sits here and says that black people are inferior, less intelligent, and white people are superior, when in fact, white people didn't have the knowledge in the beginning. It was taught to them by black people. And this is where we're going to get into talking about the Moors. So let's look at this video and then we'll talk some more. Oh, by the way, if you can hit that subscribe button and also that like button, it would help. And if you haven't seen my earlier videos, it would be good. In fact, you can go back to the beginning ones and check out the one originally about the Moors. And so we'll give you some more context that this video doesn't talk about, but the whole together we get a really good idea about the Moors.
America, from Spain to the 14th Amendment before slavery, before 1619, before the United States even existed, black people known as Moors ruled cities, signed treaties, built empires, and even explored the Americas alongside Europeans. This is the untold story of how Moorish identity shaped black American history. Alhambra, Cordoba, Moroccan cities like Fez and Marrakesh. In medieval Spain and North Africa, Moors were Muslims of African descent, black Berbers, Arabs, and sub-Saharan Africans. Spanish records called them Moros Negros. Portuguese chroniclers used Moros Negros. They were rulers, scholars, and seafarers, not slaves. Columbus's journal, African Ships Approaching the Americas. Even Columbus acknowledged that Africans reached the Americas before him. He wrote that, "The people of Guinea have navigated to this coast and traded with the Indians. The Indians brought pieces of metal for trading, and I asked them where they came from. They replied, from the south, where there are people who have swords and who are very warlike. They said the metal was called guanine, and that it came from black men who came in boats from the south and southeast. These were the Guinea Moors, black Muslims from West Africa who had long-distance maritime contact with Native Americans. In the 15th to 17th centuries, European explorers, especially the Portuguese and Spanish, used Guinea to describe the entire West African coast south of the Sahara and north of the equator, stretching roughly from Senegal to Cameroon. It included several major regions: Upper Guinea, modern Senegal, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Grain Coast, Liberia, Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, Gold Coast, Ghana, Slave Coast, Togo, Benin, Western Nigeria. So when Columbus, the Portuguese, or early Spanish texts mention Guinea, they're not referring just to the country now called Guinea, but to the entire coastal area rich in trade, especially in gold, ivory, and later slaves. Esteban the Moor explorer of the American Southwest, and in the early 1500s, a black Berber named Esteban or Stephen the Moor became one of the first non-native people to explore the American Southwest. Originally from Morocco, Esteban was a black Moor enslaved by the Portuguese, later taken to the Americas. He traveled through Florida, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, years before English colonists even arrived. Spanish records described him as a Moor from Azamor, a city on Morocco's Atlantic coast. He spoke multiple languages, served as a guide, and was seen by indigenous tribes as a figure of power. Esteban was not a passive servant. He was a pioneering explorer. Portugal invades Morocco, enslaves black Moors. In the 1400s, Portugal launched crusades into Morocco, capturing cities like Ceuta, Tangier, and Azamor. They enslaved thousands of Moros Negros, black Moors, including men like Esteban. These captives were transported to Europe and the Americas. Doctrine of discovery authorizes enslavement of Moors under the doctrine of discovery. Popes granted Spain and Portugal the right to enslave Saracens, Moors, and pagans. This launched a centuries-long war on black Muslims and Jews, labeling them threats to Christian civilization. Black Moors in slave manifests. In the Americas, black Moors were renamed Negros, Moriscos, Guinea blacks. But in early records, you still find entries for Moro, Moreno, Moorish slave. Definitions: American Cyclopedia and Webster. Americans in the 1800s knew the meaning of Moor. The 1828 Webster Dictionary, a black or tawny man, a Negro. The 1873 American Cyclopedia, The term was often used to denote Arabs, Berbers, and Negroes of a Mohammedan faith. The term Moor carried racial, cultural, and religious meaning, especially when applied to black Muslims. John Jay and the U.S.-Morocco Treaty. In 1786, the U.S. signed a treaty with Morocco brokered by Chief Justice John Jay. It protected all Moors or Moroccan subjects on American soil, black or otherwise. Some free black Americans used this treaty to claim Moorish identity, arguing they were not subject to enslavement under U.S. law. David Walker's appeal. In 1829, abolitionist David Walker reminded black Americans, "We once taught the Spaniards. We introduced civilization to them." He was referring to the Moors, black Muslims who ruled Iberia and brought science, architecture, and governance to Europe. Walker saw the Moors as proof that African...
Right. Again, here's some more information about the Moors. Now, when I talk about it, the Moors were very dark-skinned people. Of course, there might have been variations, but many of them were described as Ethiopian people, or looking like Ethiopians. Also a reddish tone many times to their skin color. They were warriors and they were tough, but they conquered Europe and they brought education to Europe. As I talked about in my first video, 99.9% of Europe was illiterate. And there was only 2 colleges or universities within Europe, and Moors established over 17 universities. They built up Europe. They were highly educated individuals. Does that mean every single one of them? No. Just like in any society, there are different variations of education. But as a society, they were educated. They visited America before Christopher Columbus. They were meeting the Indian people before we did, or the Native Americans. You see, all this hypocrisy that has gone on for years and years and years and years and years, lying about the first people who were not white, lying about the fact that African people are less intelligent, that they're inferior, when in fact, African people built civilizations. Not only the Moors, but Egyptians, when they were darker skinned people before that changed. They built this civilization in this world. It was the Moors who brought education to Europe. So before the Moors, Europe was illiterate. It took going to a black university to get an education so then they could somehow become superior. We have to start recognizing what these people contributed. Now, we may not believe with them politically or militarily, but like we have been perfect that way. We've been a very vile and brutal country. How we have killed and murdered people. Later on, people were enslaved. Many Moorish people were enslaved. In fact, some of the earlier African Americans, they came from a Moorish history, but they were denied these education. They spoke multiple languages. How many people in the United States speak more than one language? Some start maybe speaking Spanish. I use American Sign Language. But how many people speak them? Many countries today speak multiple languages, at least 2, 3 languages. But America, who's supposed to be greater than everybody else, really is more just arrogant more than everybody else and a bully more than everybody else, speaks one language generally, and everybody else has to bow to Americans. We are blessed in that way because England, which it wasn't a blessing for everybody else, conquered all over the world, and so English became a dominant language, not because of America, but because of England. So because of domination, we get our way. Well, yet these other countries speak multiple languages. Who does that make more intelligent or more inferior? Neither of them. But you get my point. All these people have been called inferior and they speak multiple languages. See, it isn't about inferiority or superiority. It's about access to education. It's about access to opportunities. And when people take away your resources for their own, that limits your ability to progress. When people colonized Africa and turned it into what they wanted to be, that hurt their progress. Although today they're making more and more progress. When will we start understanding and caring about people? You remember when Donald Trump, there was an episode where Donald Trump met with a Liberian leader, and he said, he told him, boy, your English is so good, which was extremely insulting. Of course, their English is good. It's one of the languages they speak, but they speak multiple languages. Donald Trump doesn't speak but one language, and he doesn't do very well doing that. But again, his arrogance, his self righteousness, his superiority as a white male puts down and degrades other people. But what's new with him? He does that. He does it to all people. Nobody is really equal to Donald Trump in his mind. When will we be a nation who treats people better? The first thing we have to do is acknowledge the truth in history. And we have to stop thinking as white people in this country, or I like to say a light brown people who are Caucasian people, because we're not really white. This is white. I'm not white. But as Caucasian people, that we are special to God, not more special. We didn't come first. That doesn't make us inferior. But when we acknowledge that, when we can acknowledge other people's value, and we can acknowledge other people's history that they did certain things. Yes, Caucasians have done things, but they needed the learning and the history from other people who are darker skinned than them, in order to make their accomplishments. When we start valuing everybody for their own individual accomplishments, when we stop belittling and tearing down history, we can actually be a better people. Now, I understand that because people don't follow God, we're going to have problems in this world, all kinds of problems. But this country, the United States, is probably worse than most countries out here as far as racism and human degradation. There are other places and problem spots as well. But we certainly have nothing to criticize anybody about. We treat people terrible in this country. Our political system acts like we have choice, and then once they're elected, too many of them go off and do whatever they want to do without caring about their constituents. Some of our politicians do care. We need to be aware of who we elect and who we vote. The Moors are an important part of history. They're an important part of who we are as Caucasians and African Americans and others. Caucasians owe their history to the Moors. We owe our education to the Moors. African Americans owe their history, their lineage to the Moors and to others. When we can stop trying to be better than everybody else as Caucasians and start cherishing each other, man, we can do so much together. When we start loving each other, we can do a lot together. And I'm not talking about romantic love here. I can love my brother and care about him and care about his destiny, care about the kind of person he is, and it has nothing to do with romance or sexuality. You see, we've got to start using that word in its broader term, because in the Greek, there are many different words to describe love. You've got agape, which is a godly love that means unconditional love. You've got phileo, which is a brotherly love. You've got eros, which is a romantic or sexual type love. And you have storge, which is a family type of love. So see, I can love my brother with phileo. I can love my brother with agape. I can love my brother in storge. I've been around a long time with him, so he feels maybe he's not exactly family, but he feels like family to me. He feels like my brother. Okay? So, brothers, we shouldn't be afraid of loving each other. Just make it clear to people what you mean. Don't let it be misinterpreted. There shouldn't be a problem with saying, if we get over this idea, this arrogant masculinity, and just start caring about human beings, we can be better. We can be better men. We can be better fathers. We can be better husbands. We can be better at the way we run countries. Now, I'm not excluding women in this. Women have so much to offer beyond what we give them credit for. I'm just focusing a little bit on men right now because there's a lot of problems with the way we think about things, men. But we need men and women together to be focused on a better future, a better country, a better way of viewing people. Until the next time, on American Christian or Christian American.